Welcome to the studio review for Chapter 15. This is the third in a series of studios that uses the Spa Day application. And this time we're going to go to the user signup part 2 branch. This is where we will find the application kind of coded to the point where we left off with Chapter 14. So this will give us a chance to use the user class and user controller that have already been created and then add validation to them with some of the things that we've learned from Chapter 15. So the first thing we're going to do is to add the annotations in the model to make sure that we're defining what the rules are for validation for each of these fields. So we've got username and password and email that we'll be starting with. And then later for the bonus mission, we'll also make sure that verify is required. And they tell us that, email's optional, the others are required. And specifically, username needs to be between 5 and 15 characters and password needs to be at least 6 characters long. So we're going to do that. And then we will go over to the controller to actually make sure that it has access to this user object from the beginning when the form first loads, which is going to help us with some binding. And then we can actually also make sure that when we handle the post, the form submission, that we enable checking of those rules that we set in the model with the @valid annotation, and we add the errors objects. And that will allow us to make use of the error messages that were defined in the model, and send all of that to the page whenever we send them back to the form and say, hey, you didn't do something right, and here's specifically what you didn't do right, and give them a chance to fix it, and then submit it and allow it to go through successfully once everything is cool. And then the validating that passwords match, they remind us here that as things exist, we are actually using that verify field to do it manually. So we're not going to be able to do it the same way with errors has errors, but we will do that down here in the bonus mission. So let's go ahead and get started at the top. Once you are in this user sign up part 2 branch, you will have the right starter code, and we can get it started over here in the model. You'll notice they've got the 3 fields: username, email, and password. They've gone ahead and created this separate, no arg constructor is what this is called, where you don't have to pass anything in order to create an object of the user class. And it's not very useful if you actually are trying to save information from the form, but it is useful for making sure that the form knows about the model ahead of time when it first loads. So we can have this constructor just for that purpose, and then have the original constructor be the secondary one now that calls that one because it is the primary, but then actually sets the values that come from the user through the input fields. So we have all of our regular users, excuse me, we have all of our getters and setters. Those have not changed. Okay. So let's take a stab at this. We are going to make sure that we meet all these conditions, and you might, put like, not blank or not null or not empty or something like that on username and password to make sure that they're required. However, if you're checking the size, that pretty much takes care of it for you, because one of the things that those other annotations look for is does it have a length after you trim it? Like, let's say there's some blank spaces in there, they trim it and suddenly there's nothing there but an empty string, then it would validate on that basis. But if we're checking to make sure it has a minimum number of characters, then that's all we really need to do. So I'm going to come up here to username and just go ahead and add the size, which is what we use for strings. Add this annotation and just say min is going to be 5, max is going to be 15, and the message we want to put on the field is username must be 5 to 15 characters long, and that's it. We can do the same thing essentially for password, except here, we're not concerned about a max. We really only just want to make sure that it's at least 6 characters long. And so we can say, password must be at least 6 characters long. All right, so we will come back over here, and it says email's optional, but if it's provided, it needs to have the format of an email address. So Spring has this email one, and it has certain things you can do, like you can see right there, the regular expressions, if you know how to use regular expressions, which is beyond the scope of this course. But that would allow you to be very specific in how you define what the formatting of all of the characters need to be. For now, we're just going to stick with the message. We're going to let it do its default validation, which is not as strict as maybe we would want it to be in a professional setting, but it'll work for now. And just say, if you have something, then validate it, and we'll just say invalid email format. And just let it be like that. Okay. So that takes care of setting the rules in the model, making sure everything is defined clearly for, how it is going to go about deciding whether something is valid or not. So let's go back over here. Once we've done that, we need to pass this model down. So we're going to go to the controller and go to the get handler, and make sure that we have added this in. So we're going to need model, and then we're going to say model.add attribute, and we'll just say pass down a new user, and no arguments. We just want to make you aware, make the template aware of what all the fields are that are a part of this model class, and then it can bind to them. And it mentions here how that means that the object is accessible by the name as user automatically. And it also, they point out that you have some redundant code now over in the other controller, because now that it already knows about user, you don't need to pass all of these things down at all. So we're going to, and we don't really even need to pass verify down, because we don't intend to allow it to stay in the field. We want that to blank out anyway, if they get it wrong and it sends them back to the form. So we can go ahead and update the template now to make use of the fields with, user.username, user.email, that sort of thing. And then they also mentioned we should remove type equals email, because that provides the built-in browser validation, and we don't want the browser to stop it on the client side. We want to actually validate it on our server side using the definition that we put in the model. So we'll go over here to add. We'll take type equals email off, and then we'll also take off both name and the th value, because now we can actually bind instead with th field to user.email. So we can do the same thing here and say th field is bound to user.username. And then for the password, similarly, I'm going to leave the type equals password on, because that is actually the browser's way of hiding. It provides those little dots or whatever instead of actually showing you what the password is, for security purposes, if someone was looking over your shoulder, or screen sharing, for example. Okay, but this one we have to leave alone for now, because we don't actually have a field yet in the model for this verification part, the second password. So we'll just leave this. Oh, and you know what? I totally forgot to put the variable expression, and that's important. So we have to bind it dynamically with a variable expression. Okay, so user.username, user.email, and user.password. Those are bound now. It means two things. One, it already knows about them ahead of time. And that means that when we reload the field, when we reload the form, once there's errors, it will actually be able to fill the value that was last put in the field if we want it to. Okay, so I think this is all we need to do for now. Let's give this thing a run. Oh, and one more thing. We have the same issue as we did in the last two, where they have the path to CSS, but they forgot to create that folder. So I'm going to right click on static, create a new directory, call it CSS, and then just drag the styles.css file into it and say refactor. And so now these references should work. Let's run it. All right, clearly the CSS is doing, but we actually need to go to /user/add. So we have this here. We've defined our rules. If I say sign up though, you'll notice that nothing's being verified. And you're like, well, wait, I mean, validated. Why didn't it validate? Well, there's a good reason for that. We actually have to come down here and we have to enable validation by adding this @valid annotation to that user parameter. So we'll come here to the post handler, look for model attribute user, and right here between model attribute and user, we want to add the @valid annotation. That makes sure that Spring will go look in the model for those rules and then apply them. And then the second thing we need in order to be able to handle the errors and also make use of the messages is this errors object using errors, which is an object of errors. So I'll put this here. Now, if I were to put this down here at the end, we'd have a problem because this string verify would be separating that from the actual model here. We need to put it right after this. So we're actually going to say errors and then errors. Yeah, and then comma. And then we can continue using this for now until we get to the bonus mission. But it's important for this to be right after this. So let's go ahead and add in our logic here, because now if we're going to do that, it means to handle it, we need to check for this errors has errors, which returns true or false. And we still need to check to make sure the password and equals verifier equals, but we can't, we need to do both. So I'm going to say if there is no errors, so if not errors dot has errors and user dot get password equals verify. If both of those things are true, then we can go ahead and send the user onto the index page like planned. Otherwise, okay, put this up here. Otherwise, we'll still have our little error message saying the passwords do not match, which is not necessarily true. We really should have more about or more logic on here, because now it might just be that there's something like this that's wrong and it might have nothing to do with this. However, this is going to be very temporary because we're going to do the bonus mission in a second. So I'm going to go ahead and just leave this to where it's going to display this, but we send the user back to the form anyway. So let's rerun this. And now that we're handling it, we're checking the error messages and we are validating. We should at least see when we go to submit the add form that it's going to keep us in the form. Anything we've entered will still be there. So I could do like Carrie Jones, and then I could do Carrie, and then, a couple of fake passwords, and then say sign up. Okay. All it's telling me right now are passwords do not match, which may not have even been the problem necessarily. I clearly have a problem with the email. So it's catching it. It's stopping us from moving forward. This logic part is right here is working, but where are our error messages, right? We haven't added those yet. So we're going to go back over to add, and we're actually going to add below here. We're going to put in a paragraph and just say th errors equals, and then we can use the exact same binding that we already have to the field that will provide the error message we associated with that field in the model. And it'll function both as a th if, it'll only display if there is an error for this field. It functions as th text, where it's going to put that error message between the tags. But it, this specifically associates it so that it goes and looks, Spring will look right here for username and check and see on what basis it's being validated, and then what that message is, and then provide that. So we'll do the same thing for these other two for now. And just change this one to email, this one to password. All right, let's rerun this. All right, and I'm going to go back to /add. All right, let's say I have too short of a name, and I have this and this and this. We'll just trigger all of them all at once. Okay, username must be 5 to 15 characters long. Invalid email format. Passwords do not match. And if I were to go back to the form again, and this time maybe I get these two right, but then my passwords are too short. They're the same, but they're too short. So two things here. One, it does catch that it was too short on this field, and it says password must be 6 characters long. But this passwords do not match. That actually wasn't true. I typed in the exact same thing, but that's where our logic is failing us right here, where it's going to pass this down regardless of whether this failed based on this or based on this. And it could be that this was perfectly good, but if there's errors anywhere else associated with any other fields, it's still triggering the else here, and that's when we get this. So we need a better way to handle this. So that's where the bonus mission comes in. So let's take a look at this. We want to make it so that the user class, the model, actually contains a 4th field for verify password. So we're going to do that over in the model. We're going to add another one, private string verify password. Okay. Okay, and we are going to be putting an annotation here, but before we do that, let's come down and make sure we finish adding this so that it's part of the constructor and that it gets set when the constructor runs here. And then it also has getters and setters. And then before we do the annotation, we need to write an instance method called check password that is just going to compare those two. So we're no longer in the controller going to be checking it here. We're going to take that off entirely so that we can just handle it through the errors. So we want to check it. Let's write this thing, public void check password. And they tell us here that there's three things that we want to check for. Neither of them can be null, and they need to match, right? So we want to make sure that neither of them are null before we check. And then if they don't match, we're going to intentionally set verify password to null so that it will trigger a not null error, which we're going to add down here to that field. And then we're just going to make sure that when it tries to set the password and set verify password, it's also going to check the password after that, and then override that value for verify password, so it can trigger that error. So that sounds a little bit confusing. Just I'll explain it as I go. Okay. So first, let's just make sure we have the right logic for validating these two against one another. We want to say if password is not equal to null, and verify password is not equal to null, and not password equals verify password, So if all three of those things are true, then that means we have a problem and we need to set verify password to null. We're going to use the setter we just created here. And then in both of these setters, we want to call it right here and say, you know, check password and check password. Okay. And then this is where it's important, because if we're going to actually set it to null, then that's what we need to validate on, right? And say this thing can't be null, but if we have a problem, we're going to set it to null on purpose, so it'll trigger this. So we'll add not null and then give it a message. And this is just going to be the same message we had before. Passwords, you know, do not match. I think that was the method, the message we had before. Yeah, so that should take care of it. So then over here, we no longer need to pass down this extra attribute we're calling error. And, you know, we simplified this so that errors is handling everything. We no longer need to pull in this string verify, and we're going to change the field here to actually work the same way that password does, so that we have th field equals, and then use the variable expression to say user.verify password. So now those are bound together. We want to do the same thing with an error message here directly on this field that'll say, you know, display the message for that not null annotation if there is an error. And then down here, we can get rid of this altogether because that was our thing. And actually, those things were so close together, we're going to have a hard time telling them apart. I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to change this to say something like passwords do not match at all, so we can tell the difference. Okay. That's silly, but it'll work, because otherwise it's going to look just like this. Okay, let's go back to user/add and get ourselves a fresh form. Okay, so if I say sign up, right now, we're not triggering the message on verify password because they do match, right? They're both null, so it's not even going to trigger that. Right now, it's just catching that username and password aren't long enough, and that's enough. So we can just come in here and take care of that. I'll say, you know, Carrie Jones, and I'm going to go ahead and, you know, put in my, you know, I'll say like, you know, crj@jones.com or something. And then here, I can put, you know, something, and I'll put something else, and it'll take care of the length requirements. But passwords do not match at all. So we know that that's working on that field specifically now that we've changed it. And of course, now that I've done that, I'll change it back. But I just wanted to prove that it's no longer the message that used to be there that was, you know, between these two, even though it was the same text. Because yeah, everything being in line here makes it hard to tell on the page that it wasn't just the same thing from before. But it's not, and we have successfully updated this so that all of the fields are, you know, encapsulated inside this user class, and errors.hasErrors is handling it for all four of them, because we now have these rules that are defined here in the model. Okay, I hope this has been helpful for you, and I will see you in the next one.